Okay, this is David Zierler, director of the Caltech Heritage Project. It's Friday, January 14th, 2022. I'm delighted to be here with Professor Liang Jiang. Liang, it's great to be with you. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, nice meeting with you, David. Yeah.
Liang, to start, would you please tell me your current title and institutional affiliation?
Yes, I'm currently a professor at the Prescott School of Molecular Engineering at the University of Chicago.
Liang, it's an obvious question, but why are you in the School of Molecular Engineering, given your research focus and area of expertise?
Yeah, so to be honest, that I'm not an expert in really like doing the molecular engineering in the narrow sense, but I guess the title for molecular engineering is the more originally towards the kind of nanoscience, nano engineering. And now it's actually about like 2 years ago that it was a molecular engineering institute, and now it's getting to the School of Molecular Engineering. So it actually like here we cover both like kind of like a quantum engineering, immunoengineering, and kind of like a sustainable engineering. So basically like a quantum engineering is have like 1/3 of efforts here in the School of Molecular Engineering. And actually, I have lots of my colleagues actually trained as a physicist and working, exploring like a quantum science and engineering here.
Liang, is that to say that research in your group is dedicated more towards applications and even translational research?
And yeah, well, I would say like definitely there is aspect on like try to like explore like novel applications or maybe like overcome practical challenges so that we can benefit from the like the power of quantum. And on the other hand, as I mentioned, we also like look into fundamental aspects of like a quantum information and how to like get the fundamental limits of like how much information you can kind of like transmit over a quantum channel and how to develop like new ways to correcting errors. So I would say it's a combination of both like uh, more traditional kind of like a practical side, and also there are also fundamental aspects of the research here.
Liang, of course, Chicago has one of the best physics departments in the country. Do you collaborate with anyone in the Department of Physics?
And yes, we actually have a very close collaboration. And so, for example, like I'm working with Professor Dave Schuster's group, working on like try to using like superconducting devices to do quantum information processing.
How big is your group right now? How many graduate students, how many postdocs do you have, and what are some of the things that they're working on?
Yeah, so currently I have a group about like a little bit over 15 people, and with about like half of the group members graduate students, about half of the members postdocs, and some of the postdocs are postdoc fellows working with other faculty as well. Yeah, but that's roughly the distribution. And my group is a theory group working on quantum information and so the theme is really try to use like a quantum control and error correction ideas to overcome like practical imperfections, so that we will be able to like achieve the benefits of quantum in terms of like quantum computing, communication, sensing, and other applications.
Now, beyond Chicago, given the applications that you're working on, where in industry are you doing collaboration?
Yeah, so regarding industrial collaboration, I would say that probably like two types of potential collaboration or ongoing ones. One is that currently I'm an Amazon scholar, so I also like work closely with researchers at Amazon AWS, try to explore new ways to do like a quantum error correction, so that we'll be able to achieve like a scalable quantum computing in the near future. And the other potential collaboration which I see is that I also like with my collaborators we also find like some patterns which maybe may not necessarily just for like fault-tolerant quantum computing, maybe some ideas for like quantum sensing and other quantum applications, and those might also benefit with other other companies who are interested in using quantum. So I
Liang,
would say that's probably more two general approaches. Yeah.
Liang, some overall questions about where you see quantum computers heading. So, first, just the timeline. There's a range of answers that I've heard on this. When do you think quantum computing will be a reality? Are we there now? Are we close to it, or is it long out into the future as you see it?
Yeah, well, I think that question, maybe the answer depends on how do you define quantum computing? Because people have already demonstrated like a small scale, like a quantum computer with a few qubits, and even demonstrate some of the algorithms like a Grover search or Shor algorithm over a small scale. And so in some sense, we already kind of like a proof of principle demonstration is there. And now maybe more of interest to a general audience is that, okay, are we going to benefit from having a quantum computing device? And this is actually like an ongoing research, and there are like people exploring like a noisy intermediate scale quantum applications. Can we use the existing noisy devices to do something useful? Which I think it's happening right now, and it's a still open research question. And I would say like in the longer term, if we can build a scalable fault-tolerant quantum computing, it might take a while, maybe a decade or even longer. But then we will be able to build a full scalable fault-tolerant quantum computer. So I think it's something happening right now, and it's really exciting to be part of this history. Yeah.
In terms of achieving full scalability, as you mentioned, what are both the theoretical challenges, what are the experimental challenges, and what are even the engineering challenges to get there?
Yeah. So it's actually to be honest, I think that maybe different group or different researcher may have their vision about how to achieve a full scalable quantum computer. For example, there are different experimental platforms like trapped ion superconducting qubits, or even optical systems or quantum dots and so on. So I think everyone will have a different version. But I think that there's a common challenge, which is that quantum error correction is indeed much harder than classical error correction, because quantum states are fragile. So we need to kind of on the theory side, develop efficient, robust quantum error correcting codes to correct practically relevant errors. And this is still an ongoing research, including my group and many other researchers are looking into this topic. And I would say developing good codes, developing good architectural designs will be important. On the experimental side, I think that people are working really hard to improving existing platforms, as well as exploring new forms or new qubits. And I think scalability is definitely a challenge. You want to build many qubits which are good, and the connectivity is another challenge. You want to make sure these qubits are well connected in a controllable way. And I would say in terms of engineering challenge, that's definitely once you have thousands or millions of qubits, then how do you control these quantum bits in a hardware efficient way, and how to manage all these potential heating or power consumptions and so on. I think it's definitely I would say probably it will get to the scale that maybe no single research group at the university level will be able to do it. And it's actually a good time to explore potential industrial partners or even national labs to do all these at a larger scale.
Liang, you mentioned the idea that quantum systems are fragile. I wonder what you mean by that.
Yeah, so the fragility of a quantum system is that, first of all, quantum bits is something more than a classical bits, because we want to maintain not only the 0 and 1, we also want to maintain the superposition of 0 and 1. And when you have a quantum bits sitting in the physical environment, there are all kinds of environmental noise that might cause not only the bit flip, but also dephasing, which destroys the interesting superposition that we want to use for information processing. So that is actually really hard. And it also makes the error correction hard, because we cannot look at the bits and do the error correction. We need to have clever ways to do error correction without destroying the encoded information.
The idea that error correction is hard. First of all, what are the errors and what's so difficult about correcting them?
Yeah, so theoretically, we would like to make a model for the error. And typically, we will say bit flip or dephasing, which is related to whether it's 0 or 1. That's potentially bit flip would destroy that. And dephasing would destroy the superposition. And in practice, there also a leakage error. It may not just a two-level system. It can go to some other states. So all these are like practically relevant errors that we need to correct. Yeah.
Now, where you are coming from an engineering perspective, being in the School of Engineering, are you asking different questions? Do you have different interests than if you were in a physics department, for example?
Yeah, well, I would say like deep in my heart, I'm still thinking I'm a physicist, like by training, and I would say like it's actually an interesting time that there may be more like quantum information is now being more widely accepted as like okay embraced by like engineering department and other departments as well. Yeah, but I would say like from research perspective, I wouldn't say that this is an engineering question or this is a physics question. I think all these questions are important and interesting to address. And maybe for individual researchers is that basically we have our own like research tools or research ideas, try to like address or resolving those questions. And of course, that maybe there are different types of questions. Some of them are more fundamental, like asking about the fundamental limits or like developing like a general like frameworks to address those questions. And some of them are maybe more specific for a certain type of noise. How do you correcting them? Or maybe for a specific platform, how do you design the specific control paths to to achieve the best performance of the gates? So I would say like there is, at least for a theory group, we can actually investigate such a wide range of questions, which I personally find is exciting. And also it's beneficial to know like all these different at the different levels. One is at a higher level, the other could be like more at specific, so that we'll have a better understanding to know that whether we're developing a good theoretical model to study the system, and maybe we'll have the best theoretical tools to address those questions. Yeah.
Liang, to come back to the idea of achieving full scalability with quantum computers, to what extent do we need to have a good idea for what quantum computers will be useful for? And to what extent is that not a relevant conversation and the focus is on let's build them, and at that point, it'll start to become apparent what we can use quantum computers for?
Yeah, well, I think that it's a process that, first of all, we do know there are certain quantum algorithms like short factoring or global search that will be something that the classical devices cannot do. So if we can build some device to demonstrate these algorithms at the level that the classical device cannot do, then it's already like demonstrate the power of quantum computer. And if at some point we can achieve the fault tolerance and get to that level, I think that would be great. And at the same time, we're also like looking into new quantum algorithms. I think that's actually an important question for the whole community, because if there is like such a clever such a powerful device, it will be actually helpful to actually further expand the application, not just related to specific algorithms. Maybe we can extend it to some other important questions that people want to solve.
Liang, some technical questions. First, some nomenclature. What does quantum transduction mean?
Yes, so this is actually related to like one of the research thrusts in my group. And here the transduction refers to like we want to build like a quantum coherent interface so that you can convert quantum information from one physical platform to another. And one example is that nowadays we have like quantum computers like in superconducting devices, which store and process information in the microwave domain. And on the other hand, when we do communication, the best way to communicate over longer distances is to use optical fiber, which store and process information in the optical domain. And the microwave and optical modes, first of all, they are both like electromagnetic field, but on the other hand, that they are at a very different frequency. So it is actually a non-trivial task to convert like every microwave photon to the optical photon without like losing coherence. And this is actually something that the community is actually working on, because if we can achieve such a quantum transduction, then we will be able to like connect different superconducting quantum computers with our optical fiber link, so that we'll be able to build a larger scalable quantum computer based quantum network connecting all these quantum computers, so that we'll get a more like a computational power.
Liang, some questions about the idea of quantum communication. What does that mean? Is there such a thing as a quantum internet, that actually quantum computers will change the way we communicate with one another?
Yes. So there is actually a vision that maybe in the near term we'll build a quantum internet. So I think that everyone knows that we have the classical internet, which send the classical bits over the network. And however, that's different from the quantum internet, so that which we can send like a quantum bit of information over the internet. And the one key difference, for example, is the use of like a quantum internet. We can achieve secure quantum communication, which is a protocol that allows like generating secret keys between the users, so that the user can use that for like a kind of a secure communication, which in the classical world, there is actually no such a corresponding algorithm to achieve that level of security. And moreover, with the quantum internet, you can also use it for like other applications, such as first what I mentioned earlier on, you can connect the quantum computers with the quantum internet to build a larger scale quantum computer with the exponential growth of the computational power. Moreover, for applications such as quantum sensors, if we can build like a network of quantum sensors, we will have a significant benefit. For example, something called a quantum telescope is that you can connect different optical telescopes with the quantum internet. Then you can actually like potentially resolve have a better resolution to see more remote stars in the optical domain. Yeah. So there are these very interesting applications which will benefit from quantum internet.
Liang, the idea of a quantum telescope, to clarify, you're not talking about a telescope that will simulate observation. You're talking about a telescope that will actually see things.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is actually an idea proposed by Daniel Gottesman and the collaborators about like maybe a decade ago. And the idea is that it's difficult to send photons, precious astronomical optical photons over long distances. But if you can have a quantum internet, you can teleport those photons so that you can effectively increase the size of the telescope so that you will be able to see more remote objects with a better angular resolution. Yeah.
That gets me to some other questions about the ways in which quantum computers might help resolve other fundamental questions in physics, like pushing beyond the standard model or finding particles beyond the Higgs or merging general relativity and quantum mechanics. What are you most excited about in that regard?
Yeah, so there is actually a very active research direction right now. Like people are trying to build like quantum sensors to search for dark matter, which is one of the predictions. One of some of the theories predict there's those like axion particles which might exist, and building like a quantum sensor might potentially be useful for that task.
Now, you're also an Amazon scholar. To what extent does that get you back to Caltech to collaborate with some people from your earlier years in education?
Yes. So first of all, I think it's really like an exciting movement, like especially for Caltech, and there will be actually there's already building established, for the Amazon AWS research on quantum, and so currently led by Oscar Penter and Fernando Brandao in both experimental and theoretical research, and it's great to connect them and working on something bigger and exciting. And moreover, it's also I find it's really great fun to also working together with John Prescott and Gil Rafael, who I worked closely during my postdoc, and with John I actually trace back to my undergrad, and it's really great fun actually to work and discuss with the people, and it also reminded me really good old days when I was at Caltech as a postdoc or undergrad. Yeah.
Liang, is part of your research agenda, is the work for Amazon totally separate from what you're doing at Chicago, or do you integrate the research to some extent?
Yeah, so, this is a bit like a tricky question. And at first, I think that there is at the fundamental level, we are all thinking about how to use quantum to solve these outstanding questions. On the other hand, there is like a orthogonality that the Amazon research is specific for a particular platform, and we want to build a particular device. While I would say, on the other hand, I will have the other part of the research in my own group, which will be more exploratory and also like maybe more on the fundamental aspects about like different ways of doing quantum control error correction and the different applications like sensors and like a quantum network. Yeah, so I think it's interesting to have this balance. And on the other hand, it's also really good that maybe some of my students, if they're actually already two of my students already like when they graduate, they join the Amazon AWS as a full-time researcher. And it's also like a very interesting career path for them and to kind of working in the industry and also use their talent to solve like outstanding questions.
Liang, without getting into any sensitive discussion about what you're specifically working on for Amazon, is your sense that these major companies, Amazon, Google, IBM, Honeywell, are they involved in a race where everyone is trying to get to the same conclusion or objective? Or are these different companies pursuing different projects and are even perhaps asking different questions?
Yeah, well, I think that maybe the goal, probably there is a similar goal, try to build a larger scale quantum device that can process quantum information. However, different companies actually taking very different approaches, right? For example, like a Honeywell, and they actually like try to do this like ion-based quantum computing, while like Google are doing superconducting like a transmon or XMon based quantum computing, while at Amazon there will be a different approach. And also at Microsoft, it's also a different approach. So I think it's actually a very interesting time, like different places are exploring very different methods. And of course, that even though the platforms are different, there are some of the like the ideas that how to overcome errors and so on. There may be some like a commonality. So if a technique or breaks through from one place, might potentially also benefit the other platforms or other companies as well. And I think that one good thing is that I saw like many of these places still like publish like research papers, so that rather than like just keep it as an industrial secret, it's good that I think for these deep tech, it's actually important that at the early stage we should all work together to kind of overcome the major challenges before, so that it will be able to achieve like this the benefit from the quantum system like in the near term, rather than like working independently, hiding all the secrets. Because I think that's probably I don't think we're anywhere close to that stage, because it is still like a very active research area. And while at the same time, it's really beneficial to have these industrial inputs to get more resources so that the field can develop faster and also attract more talents to kind of working together on these outstanding, challenging questions. Yeah.
Liang, as you know, 50 or 60 years ago, Bell Labs supported fundamental research, whether or not it had anything to do with the corporate bottom line, what was in the financial interest of the industry. Given the fact that today hundreds of millions of dollars are being poured into this research, does that suggest a similarity where these companies are supporting basic science? Or are we already at the point where a company like Amazon has articulated ways in which quantum computing might be beneficial to its research, to its business, and so it's supporting research on that basis?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I have to say that I'm not like, or it may be beyond my pay grade to like know like all these like longer term plans for different companies. But I do see like there's actually a good thing that different places actually like and not only just say we're just focusing on particular like technique and so on. They're also like research, like when you look at those research publications, they're all very interested in these like some fundamental aspects of research. Try to see if there is a new way of getting some like a topological order for quantum systems, or if there is actually a new better design of like a qubits, or if there's actually like a cosmic ray would actually destroy like a potentially the quantum computer, which actually makes a lot of discussion like recently. Yeah, so I think that these are actually very interesting things that emerged from these industrial supported research. but I think it's really beneficial for the whole research community to have these exciting results to think about. Yeah.
Liang, for you, this is unique because most of the people I'm talking to were either only graduate students or postdocs, but you were also an undergraduate at Caltech. So to set the stage, when you got to Caltech, that would have been what, in the year 2000?
Yeah, well, actually, I did my undergrad partly in Peking University. Then I transferred to Caltech in 2001. And then I spent my 3 years at Caltech to like to learn physics. And it was actually a really like a fun 3 years in retrospect. Yeah.
Now, were you already, I mean, so at the beginning of your undergraduate education, this is really the beginning of IQI. This is the beginning of John Preskill starting to think about quantum information. Is that one of the reasons why you wanted to come to Caltech? Was that on your radar coming from China?
Well, actually, when I was applying, actually, I wasn't aware of that the quantum information is actually an emerging field because, I was just starting taking quantum mechanics at that time. And however, like when I was actually like, even before I come, I heard that, well, there is actually quantum information research that sounds interesting. And also started to learn about these topics. And one thing which I would like to really like, I'm really grateful is that actually when I was undergrad at Caltech, there was this program called the Summer Undergraduate Research Program, the SURF, and which during the first summer I worked with Hideo Mabuchi on like some of the quantum optics research, which actually like really helpful for me to maybe learn about like quantum systems and decoherence. And in the second summer, I worked with John Preskill like about some of the like quantum information questions, and I find it's really helpful. And maybe like one aspect it's like a good to like in retrospect is that during these undergrad research, it's probably like I got the feeling it's very different from taking classes, because when you take a class, you do homework, you sort of know there is a solution there, you just find the way to solve it. While doing research is a completely like the other way around. You don't even know if that question has an answer, or even if the question is the right question to answer. And but that's actually like I find it's really, really helpful to have such an experience, and also know like, okay, maybe like I need to definitely learn more about the field in order to contribute to it. Yeah. But I find that's a really great experience.
As an undergraduate, was John Preskill accessible to you? Would you be able to talk to him and learn from him?
Yes. John was actually very, very helpful, and even though at the time still a bit intimidating, because I don't know like much about the field. But the one thing I recall is that actually like John actually like in our early meetings, he gave me like 2 papers kind of to read and think about, and one is about like a Kitaev-Torrey code. And he and Kitaev and others wrote a paper together. And also the other is about like a teleportation-based error correction, which is actually for the people working on the field knows that this is actually a really important idea. And honestly, at that time, it took me quite a lot of efforts to really like digest and understand those papers. But actually, it turns out that during my graduate research, those 2 papers actually like make a big impact, like so that actually multiple like my research work and the graduate school turns out to actually based on some of the ideas that actually John recommended to me when I was still undergrad at that time. So I find like I'm really grateful, and also like I find it's I really like admire like John's great insight about these like kind of like groundbreaking work. Maybe it was at that time was still not so well known, but it turns out that nowadays like it becomes sort of like a really like important tools, not just for my research, also for many other researchers' work as well.
Liang, were you aware of the IQI? Was that accessible to you? Could you hang out there as an undergraduate?
Yes, I did. Actually, like, for students, both undergrad and graduate students, free meals is always very attractive. Actually, like IQI, there was actually a free dinner. And actually, I also joined the group meetings at the time. And I have to say that, I was still at that time, just getting to learn the field. And it was still quite challenging to catch up and to know what the individual speakers are talking about. but it's a really good exposure. And in retrospect, that's actually they're really like a great, like talented people at that time, like including like David Nelson, Patrick Hayden, David Long, and the Sequenta Bose, and many others. So and at that time, like it's really like maybe Caltech was maybe one or two of the centers of quantum information research in the early 2000s. That was like it's a bless to have the opportunity actually to get exposed to the quantum information like at the early stage.
Liang, how much work as an undergraduate did you do in condensed matter physics? And did you appreciate some of the connections that would later be made between the condensed matter theorists and the quantum information theorists?
Yeah, well, I'd say that maybe most of the work I work on is more along the lines of quantum optics, like how to use like atom and photon to process information. That was kind of related to the research efforts in Mabuchi's lab before he moved to Stanford. And later on, the work with John Prescott is more on the kind of fundamental aspects in quantum, as well as like how to use like how to build like how to have ways to like build like a more robust quantum computing, such as or quantum communication. So which actually later on my graduate research is actually also along those lines. When I started my graduate school.
Now, personal question: when you first came to Caltech, did you think that you would be going back to China, or did you intend to pursue graduate school in the United States and make a life for yourself here?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I would say like when I was undergrad just coming, I haven't think that far, like, okay, where I will be like when I get, after I get my PhD. But there was an intent probably like to further do the graduate school in the US. I found that it's actually very helpful, like the days in Caltech when I was undergrad, to expose to the frontiers of research, and in particular quantum information research, which actually changed my entire research career. Yeah.
What were your interests by the time you finished undergraduate, and how did that inform what kinds of programs, even people to work with, when you started to think about graduate school?
Yeah, well, at that time, I would say like it was still quite open. And to be honest, at the level, I wasn't even sure I would do experiment or theoretical physics. And but when I get to graduate school, it kind of like even tried something else, like also like even something like a kind of like bioimaging type of related research. But later I find that actually the quantum information research is still very interesting. And moreover, and when I was in graduate school, I worked with Professor Misha Lukin, and I found that there is actually like a combination of both physical platform and quantum information, which I find that's a good balance point for me with my physics background as well as like early exposure to quantum information. I think that's actually something that maybe I can contribute to the field a little bit. Yeah.
Liang, when you got to Harvard, did Harvard have a similar center to the IQI? Was there something similar there?
At that time, I would say no, because probably maybe only like one or one and a half researcher was working on quantum information at Harvard at that time. And while at the same time, there was this CUA Center for Ultra-Cold Atom with multiple researchers from Harvard and MIT. And over there are lots of like AMO physicists and also some quantum people interested in quantum information. There were actually very interesting discussions at that time. But I would say the most focus at that time was more on the physical platform. But working with Misha, Professor Misha Lukin, I think that we actually there are some interest of building like a quantum internet, or even with defect centers to build like a scalable quantum computer at the time. Yeah.
What was Misha Lukin working on when you first got to be involved in the research?
Yeah, so actually, I recall like the first project, which is also still a project deep in my heart, with Misha, was on this quantum repeater. So the idea is that you try to use atomic ensemble to store photons, and in a quantum coherent way, so that you can overcome the fiber loss to achieve like a long distance quantum communication.
What was the process for developing what would become your thesis research?
Yeah, so actually, the field was developing very quickly, and also like at that time, one thrust of my thesis research was on quantum communication, while at the same time there was also a development called nitrogen vacancy centers in diamond, which is a color center in diamond that turns out to be a very promising quantum information processing unit, even at room temperature. So that's something which is just emerging, and I did some theoretical work based on that, which is actually related to based on one of the paper John recommended on the teleportation based schemes. And moreover, even tried some of the experiments just to demonstrate a simple idea, which which turns out to be useful for quantum information processing.
Liang, the title of your dissertation, Towards Scalable Quantum Communication and Computation, in light of what we were saying earlier in our discussion, I wonder if that's a title that could still be written today. Are we still working towards a scalable quantum communication and computation system?
Yeah, well, I would say probably it's fair to say we're still on the way towards maybe scalable computing or communication, because now I would say a smaller size systems, they are indeed being successfully demonstrated. So now, can we go from 50 qubits to 100 qubits or 1,000 qubits? Or can we go from a quantum communication from 100 kilometers to 1,000 or global scale? Which both are actually in rapidly developing state. Yeah.
So looking back, 10, 12, 13 years past, when you started to think about these things to getting to that scalable size, what has already been achieved concretely, and what's the work that remains to be done? That's as much of a challenge today as it was when you were a graduate student.
Yeah, well, I would say maybe for computation at that time, probably it was only maybe less than 10 qubits. And now it's actually people are claiming almost 100 qubits with a much better gate fidelity, which is important, not just the number of qubits, but also the gate fidelity. And also the devices that people can now, the user interface, I think it's probably much better now. Also not just the Amazon bracket is doing that, and also Microsoft also doing that. So that actually makes the quantum device more accessible to a much broader audience, and including IBM quantum experience. So that's, I would say, very different from 10 years ago. And in terms of the communication, there is this development of quantum satellite launched by Jiang Weipan's group in China. That was actually really give the promise that okay, with this probably maybe in the near future we'll have a larger scale quantum internet over thousands of kilometers. However, this might not be the only way to do it. There are also quantum repeaters, which I think that more groups are now developing quantum repeaters with improved quantum memory and more efficient interface. And especially in the US, I think it took some efforts to convince actually the government to get into the field with now more the DOE labs here in Chicago area Argonne Lab, Fermi Lab, and in Chicago we are also having this 100 kilometer long fiber links, which will allow us to demonstrate or explore a quantum internet at the regional scale.
Liang, you mentioned some research that was happening in China. After you defended, were you paying attention to that research in China? Did you think about going back home? And more broadly, when I asked you about, the race within the United States among these companies, to what extent is there a race at the national level in quantum computing between the United States and China?
Yeah, well, actually, I would say it's regarding that, there was actually a story related when I was doing my PhD. I come up with an idea with Misha on doing some quantum repeater schemes for long distance communication. And I was actually attending a conference and I met with actually Jiang Weipan in person. I said, oh, I have this interesting result. And he said, yeah, his group came up with a very similar idea. and later we actually we both submitted papers, and it turns out it's actually a good idea that the whole community So I don't know, it's I would say it's for that particular example, I think it's actually healthy, like a competition, at least like people communicate and also like and developing the whole field for this like quantum networks. Yeah. And I would say like probably the race in terms of quantum technology, I would say it's a global. It's not just between US and China. There are also many other players like in Europe, or in Japan, or in Canada, Australia, and so on. So I think it's probably like well, I think the quantum technology is not just the technology of a particular country. It's actually the technology of the entire human race. And that will actually, there are lots of things that will benefit everyone. And also it's, I think quantum technology, it's different from like a arms race. It's not like the weapon. That's actually, if you have it, you can like attack the other. It's more like something that you can take advantage of it, do something better. And so, of course, I think it's good to have some like healthy competition. That okay, well, people try to work harder and try to boost the improvement of these the whole field. Yeah, but I think right now I think it's still like a very healthy, like a kind of like a competition between like different places. Yeah, and well, of course, that with the industrial companies that joined, it's potentially like making this thing like I would say like potentially it could be like a competitive, like when the field gets really like get to the stage that there will be products being delivered. Yeah.
Liang, after you finished graduate school, did you consider other postdocs, or was the opportunity to come back to Caltech just too exciting? That was an easy choice for you.
Well, I would say like I feel like I'm fortunate enough like actually have the Caltech offer, and I didn't consider at the time was a postdoc fellow. I didn't consider like too much about the other possibilities, and because put another way is that I kind of aware that probably I didn't learn well enough about the quantum information when I was undergrad. So I need to kind of come back and learn more about the field so that I can do like a better research. But so yeah, I think it's actually a great opportunity for me to actually like to have a second chance to actually learn more about the quantum information to come back to Caltech.
Now, when you returned to Pasadena, was it already IQIM, quantum information and matter, or that transition happened already when you were a postdoc?
Yeah, so I was postdoc at Caltech during 2009 to 2012. And I think that the NSF Center for IQM IM was approved around the summer in 2012. So basically, I was about to leave, and I know that the center was, I think if I remember correctly, that center was just approved at the time.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, but I think it was really like a boost for the quantum research efforts at Caltech.
So the big transformation, that really happened toward the tail end of your time as a postdoc.
Yeah, I think so. And at that time, I still remember like there are lots of like faculties like from original IQI and also like other faculty in physics department, especially. I had like discussions and how to prepare those NSF proposals and so on. But okay, I wasn't part of it, but I know like people actually were actually working really hard to kind of give the try to like make the proposal successful.
Obviously, Liang, you're coming back to Caltech at a different stage in your career. In what ways was the IQI different? First of all, did it get bigger since you were an undergraduate?
Yeah, so I think there. Actually, I don't know exactly what the size of the IQI, but I'd say like the largest change is actually we moved to a new building. Actually, all the IQI members earlier was I think in Jorgensen, and now like then everyone moved to this Annenberg, which was actually a really nice building that I think just built around 2009, and almost everyone moved over there in Annenberg.
What were some of the big questions? You said there was more for you to learn when you came back to Caltech. What were some of the big questions you had? What were your goals to accomplish as a postdoc?
Yeah, so I would say at the time I was thinking more on this like one is quantum error correction, the other is the topological quantum systems. So so like for the latter, the first quantum error correction is something which I've been like continuously exploring, and John is definitely expert on it. And we actually like also discussed a lot I think there's still a lot for me to learn. And about like topological quantum systems, at that time it was actually a pretty like an emerging topic. Especially people appreciate that there is a possibility of building physical topological systems for quantum information processing. And there was at that time I discussed with John, and we have a project on this how to build a hybrid topological system that can work combined that can work together with more traditional like quantum bits, like superconducting qubits. And that was actually something which I find it helpful actually to have John's advice on these projects. And the other direction which related to the topological system is kind of like there was an active search for like Majorana fermions at the time, which is currently it's still a active research topic. And at that time, I was lucky enough to actually work together with Gil Rafael and Jason Alicia on this topic, and try to give some theoretical proposals of how to detect these Majorana fermions, or how to build a atomic system so that it will support Majorana fermions and potentially can be useful for proof of principle demonstration and quantum information processing.
Comparing the early years when you were an undergraduate, just from a palpable level, when you returned as a postdoc, what aspects of quantum computation seemed more realizable? That the progress that had been made was actually getting us to some future where we can envision scalability?
Yeah, and I think that there are actually a rapid development probably during those in the early 2000s. The first in the trapped ions that people were actually demonstrating a higher fidelity gates and so on, with the design of something called the Swanson-Momer gates, which is robust against the thermal noise of the ion. And for superconducting systems, there was this development on the transmon qubit, which was actually invented by my collaborators at Yale, like Rob Shulkoff, Michel Debreu, and Steve Gervin. And that allows people to actually store information in superconducting systems for much longer time, with orders of magnitude improvement in coherence. And moreover, close to the end of my postdocs, there was actually developments in terms of quantum limited readout, so that you can read out the superconducting qubits with high fidelity. And that's actually crucial because otherwise those experiments had to be averaged over many, many times. And it's like a MI experiment, which kind of will fundamentally limit the power of computing. So with those developments, I would say maybe around maybe the end of my postdoc, and I think that our experimental colleagues have made significant breakthroughs, so that trapped ion and the superconducting qubits kind of emerges as kind of the two leading platforms for the field.
Liang, we talked about some of the questions you wanted to pursue as a postdoc. What about what you saw as your areas of strength or expertise? Coming from your graduate program, what were the things that you were knowledgeable about where you felt like you had something to offer in these discussions or collaborations?
Yeah, so I think it's actually a very interesting question, because I would say every researcher is different. Everyone will have their own unique knowledge background and skill set. And I think that maybe for me, at that time, maybe what I kind of bring to the IQI was that I had some background or research experience in the AMO physics, atomic molecular optics, in kind of quantum optics, and also some research in this defect centers in diamond. So those are probably more on the physics side, so that I know okay, what the realistic noises are and how to model these systems, and what the controls we can have, what's the realistic parameters for those systems. And I think that's actually helpful, maybe complementary to maybe the things that I learned earlier on this quantum information side, so that it gives me maybe an opportunity to use these quantum information tools to further explore realistic systems. So that's what I kind of see at that time. and which I find is actually helpful, and that's to have to get exposed to different sets of expertise, so that one can actually do some new research by combining them.
Liang, even before the development of the IQIM, was your sense that there was already a trend during your postdoc years where the condensed matter theorists were becoming more involved in the IQI? Was that trend already happening at that point?
I think so. Yeah, and actually at that time, in particular, Zierler and Jason, they actually come to attend IQI meetings, and actually I was quite impressed when Gil talk about that. Oh, they have an idea of how to look for create Majorana fermions, and fortunately I said, well, okay. That's probably I think I might be able to understand and add some contribution. Yeah, but I think indeed that it's already kind of coming together even before the IQIM has been kind of started. Yeah.
Liang, what was the research culture like at IQI? Would there be weekly group meetings where everybody would share their ideas? Was there something more formal? Would you do that on an ad hoc basis? What was the community like in terms of sharing ideas with one another?
Yeah, so I would say there is a weekly group meeting, which actually John will chair, and so there will be two parts. The first part is every group member will give a 1 minute talk about what's their research and what's if there's any new results or the progress on the research, or if there are any open questions that people might offer some suggestions. And the second part will be actually more a technical seminar, one of the group members will present the results. And so the first part is usually it's interesting that there was a kind of later we impose a rule that everyone talks no more than 1 minute, because some of the group members are really excited with their results and would like to say say a lot about their research, and well, of course I don't mean it's a bad thing. It's just for the sake of time, it's really an interesting, very active environment for people to exchange ideas.
Liang, we talked about competition between companies, even competition between countries. What about among the postdocs? Was there a sense of competition among postdocs, or was it more collaborative or cooperative, would you say?
I would say first of all, people have different skills that usually people don't work on exactly the same problem. So it's not see who solved the problem or not. And I would say I see there are collaborations with the people working on a different topic or different expertise. And also at least at that time, I shared an office with actually my office mate was Alexei Gorshkov. And so one thing I think I really and kind of the environment working together with Alexei is that actually we're actually at a similar stage of looking for a job as well. But we do share all those informations about different places, and also some places we actually even get both get job interviews and also discuss about those informations, because I think it's good to think it's not a zero-sum game, because overall the whole field, if you do well, actually you will get more opportunities for the entire community. So that's actually, it's important to keep that mindset, so that we actually all work together, make all our researchers profile stronger, so that will actually increase the chance of getting a good job. Yeah. So in that sense, I would say with the mindset, it's not a zero-sum game. It's actually a more collaborative game that I think it's actually very important and helpful.
Yeah. Liang, when you joined the faculty at Yale Department of Applied Physics, were you joining a large group that was pretty well established at that point, or was your hire part of a broader effort to build something up from scratch?
I would say maybe a bit of both. I think that first of all, even when I was applying for jobs there, that in my kind of research statement, I didn't say specifically okay, what I would do for that particular for the ongoing research over there. It's more my own research profile about network, quantum control, and so on. And on the other hand, when I get there, I do feel like it's kind of such a great opportunity to explore that superconducting platform. Although like I didn't do much when I was doing my PhD or postdoc, but I find it's like so exciting that it's a great opportunity to look on that. So basically, I would say like my research was kind of maybe half and half. Half of research was actually working really closely with people there developing error correction scheme for the superconducting platform, in particular superconducting cavity modes. On the other hand, I also like have my own like research on quantum network and the quantum sensing efforts.
What did you bring with you to Yale from Caltech in terms of research interests that were really helpful in setting up a research agenda, being a member of the faculty where you have responsibilities to produce things?
Yeah, well, I would say like maybe the expertise like at Caltech, like definitely like with error correction, which I think I learned a lot from John, and and that actually like helped definitely shape the efforts at Yale, like because there was like error correction kind of being going on, which I would say like probably like even before I go in there, they're already thinking about doing that, and also already have papers on it. But I think that's the some of my expertise actually also helped later in some of the further developments. And the second is that also like my earlier like even or trace back to kind of the paper that John suggested to me about teleportation-based gates and error corrections. Then I did like some of the research on the distributed quantum computing during my PhD, and that idea turns out to be also very relevant to the platform at Yale University. So that's where also like I found that it's actually turns out to be very relevant, for the research efforts there, which have a connection to one of the first two papers I read. Yeah.
Liang, you mentioned some senior people at Yale, Michel Devoret, Steve Gervin, Rob Shelkoff. What were some of the exciting things they were doing that was relevant to what you wanted to get started on?
Yeah, so definitely these are like really like world leaders on the superconducting platforms in both theory and experiments, and I would say like they kind of did groundbreaking work in finding good qubits and good control and good like readout schemes. So now at that time, the question would be like, okay, how we scale the system up, and how we build like error correction schemes. And so regarding the scaling the system up, so one of the ideas that kind of emerged from our discussions was actually maybe we can have a distributed platforms and use the entanglement to connect like different superconducting devices, which I think actually now even big companies, I think IBM or Google or Rigetti, they're also thinking about some platforms like this. And so I think that this is something which kind of interesting that I also I think I made a bit of a like addition to that effort. And the other was about the error correction. So when I joined Yale, they already had some of ideas of writing getting the bosonic CAD code for bosonic system. Okay, well, can you just hold on a second? Yeah. Hi, Jerry. Yeah, can we actually? I'm having a meeting right now, so can we maybe start in about like I don't know, David.
Half hour would be perfect.
Yeah, can we maybe start about like 2:30? So Jerry,
yeah,
is that okay if we start in about like 30 minutes? Yeah.
Oh, you mean, okay, yeah, sure, of course.
Okay. Yeah, yes, yeah. Okay, yeah, all right, I'll see you in 30 minutes. Yeah, yeah, well, that's my student. Yeah. Yes, so I forgot about this bosonic error correction. So basically, like with some of the early trainings on error correction, I kind of like work together with people at Yale. We develop further generalized bosonic codes and also try to find like further optimize the coding and making more work along that direction, including like the experimental demonstration of some of the features of these codes.
Liang, I wonder how you might compare Yale's Quantum Institute with the IQI at Caltech. In what ways was it similar? In what ways was it different?
Yeah. So I would say like there is indeed a different style. I think at Caltech that at least the part that I get connected a lot at that time when I was a postdoc was mostly the IQI, which is more focusing on the theory, because it was at the time was mostly a theory center before like the condensed matter efforts, like the experimental efforts joined. But I know like at Caltech there's also like very strong efforts on the experimental side, like what Oscar Penter or Jeff Kimball and others are working on. But I would say like maybe when I was there, I was mostly focusing on the theory aspects at that time. And when I joined Yale, I think that they different, and they have like the leading like experimental efforts on superconducting platform at that time. So that actually like kind of pulled me a bit like towards more on the physical implementation side. So that was like one thing I see like maybe a slight difference at the time. Yeah. So yeah, but I would say like in terms of the theory aspects, before I joined, I would say it's mostly like more on the physics side and not so much efforts on the quantum information side. And maybe I kind of like I brought some of the expertise on the quantum information, like which I learned from Caltech to that effort. Yeah.
Liang, in the way that there are certain corporations and universities that partner up on quantum computation, like Amazon and Caltech, were there particular corporations that you worked with or that Yale was partnered with during your time on the faculty there?
Yes, so that's actually like my colleague Rob Shukov, and at that time, together with a few people at Yale, they started a company called the Quantum Circuit, and they actually like a plan of building some devices for for quantum computing, and I was not directly involved in that program, in that company efforts. But some of our inventions were kind of like file patent was actually licensing to that company. So it's indirect, I would say. And while at the same time that some of the really like brilliant students and postdocs from the group I collaborated with actually move on to that company. So I know like quite a bit of people over there. Yeah. But I think it's actually a very interesting effort. But I guess the difference is that it's more like a smaller size company with a more specific goal, like what they want to do, rather than like Amazon, which is probably have more resources in compared to like a smaller company. But I would say like it's a different kind of a type of like industrial efforts compared to like Amazon. Yeah.
Liang, what were some of the major papers or discoveries that you were involved with during your time at Yale?
Yeah, so I would say like there are several efforts. Like one is what I mentioned about the bosonic error correction. We kind of made some theory proposals of how to do universal gates for the bosonic codes, and also explored like comparing different bosonic codes, we find which one's better, and as well as developing some of the new bosonic codes. And the other is related to the experimental efforts of demonstrating like something called the break-even performance of the bosonic error correction. So the idea is that with a real experimental device with the realistic noise, actually my colleague Rob Shukov and his group kind of like with some theoretical support demonstrated that actually the coding scheme can actually scheme with error correction can do at least as good as the scheme with the best code without error correction. So it might sound like a trivial, say, oh, well, you just get to break even, but it actually took people decades to get there. And even now, this is probably still so far the only experiment has demonstrated break even with a realistic, practically relevant noise. And so, but I would be like optimistic that maybe in the next few years, more platforms will reach break even or even way better than that. So that's hopeful. Yeah. And maybe another effort is about like my research on this quantum network. we kind of classify different quantum network, quantum repeater protocols. And also the other is about quantum sensing. We kind of, together with my graduate student, Sisi Zhou, who's actually now a postdoc at Caltech, that actually she made a really great discovery, finding that, solve a problem for almost open question for almost 2 decades, which was actually a question raised by John and others early on about how error correction could help with the quantum sensing. And there was also a story about that if you think that's relevant.
Yeah, please tell me.
Yeah, so the story about that is that we had a research. I was actually attending a research meeting, and I ran into John. And at that time, it was about 2014. That was about the time that LIGO had a gravitational wave events being detected, if I remember correctly. Is that 2014 or 15? That in that year there was a gravitational wave events being detected, and also there was also break even about the bosonic codes. So natural question would be, can we actually put these together with error correction to help with LIGO? And we're actually thinking about if there are clever ways to do it. And actually, I passed that question to my student, who just joined the research group, and actually she was really good. And initially, I thought there's some way we can do it, but actually, she proved me wrong that I cannot, that my scheme doesn't work. And she later come up with even proof, say there's a no-go, that unfortunately error correction couldn't help with LIGO against loss error. And then we actually further generalized the results, and together with John and another member in the group, we had a paper about the necessary sufficient condition for error correction to help sensing. So that was actually a really I would say a important result, solve an open question for almost 2 decades. And of course, the question trace back to John, and he also really helped a lot with discussions that I found very, very helpful. Yeah.
Liang, we know what teleportation means from science fiction. What does deterministic teleportation mean in quantum information?
So the idea of this teleportation in the quantum setting is that you can teleport an unknown quantum state from one place to another. And this is actually and there's no violation of no cloning, because once you teleport, the original state disappeared. But the good thing is actually the state appeared in another location, which will be useful for communication, or even in the later setting, you probably can use that for computation and so on. So that it will be helpful if it's deterministic, so that you don't worry about if you teleport something and whether it will be received or not.
Liang, tell me about your visit to Jilla. How was that useful to you? What were some of the exciting things that were happening there?
Yeah, so the visit to Jilla was actually a combined mission. So at that time, I was organizing this Boulder Summer School. It was actually the Boulder Summer School is the annual summer school on Condensed Matter, but the one that I'm organizing is actually the first that series of first Boulder Summer School that actually on quantum information. So that particular year, they actually say, "Oh, quantum information seems to be an interesting topic," and we'll actually have that topic as a theme for that particular summer. And so I think it's a great opportunity to invite world-leading researchers. We have about 16 of them that come and give lectures, and it was also recorded, posted online, so that more people will benefit from that. And so that was actually a part of the one of the mission to visit Jilla. And the other mission was actually to discuss and research with the researchers there. So that was where the Jilla visiting fellow comes from. Yeah.
Liang, tell me about your decision to leave Yale and join the faculty at Chicago.
Yeah, so it's a tough decision at that time, because both places are great in research, and at that time there are I would say multiple factors that influence the decision. I would say first of all, I really enjoy collaborating with my colleagues at Yale, and we're still collaborating, and which probably the major influence was actually my wife also got like a research assistant professor position at Chicago, and there was actually for her research it was a unique opportunity that she can start her independent research. So that was actually a major like factor. I would say mostly family reasons. And research-wise, maybe like there is a little bit like extra like benefits like by moving to Chicago is that here there is a quantum network efforts at the DOE labs, which I mentioned earlier, and also like more platforms related to like quantum sensing. So those like well, and there is I think it's a combined multi-factor thing that that makes the decision. Yeah, but I would say like I really like working with the people at Yale, and we're still having like a very frequent discussions about different research ideas. Yeah.
Liang, given how important collaborations are to your research, did moving to Chicago change your research at all? The kinds of things you were interested in, the kinds of things you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, I would say like it gave me an opportunity to further expand my research. For example, like on the quantum sensing efforts, I'm working with experimental groups here that probably will build like a better quantum sensors with some ideas. And also in terms of quantum network, I think that here they are more like closer to the like a test bed of quantum network, which also like have students and the postdocs working on that direction. Yeah.
Liang, bringing our conversation right up to the present, circa January 2022, what are you working on right now?
Well, I'm actually trying to finish a few papers, and there's actually, I think we have a research result which show that we have a quantum scheme, but we'll file a patent, like submit a provisional next Monday. I assume that's okay to say it now, right? It's not like broadcasting.
That's right.
Yeah, but just yeah, we have find a classical quantum-inspired classical algorithm, which can do something better even than a quantum computer, which is interesting.
That's an unexpected.
I don't know whether I should be happy or not happy, but it's
that's a pretty unexpected result, I would assume.
Well, it's unexpected. I would say like initially, like people were saying that this will be one of the applications for like boson sampling, which is called it's an algorithm which allow you to kind of get the vibronic spectrum of the molecules, and so it's actually pretty difficult with the existing classical algorithm, and the people are proposing using a quantum device to do it. And actually, my postdoc Changhong Oh, who actually like pioneered the research and come up with a great idea. Actually inspired by quantum, but using quantum optics techniques, and combined with some other methods that we can actually solve the problem with a comparable or even better performance than quantum device. So I have to say I have a mixed feeling because I really want to like have an advantage of quantum device, but at the same time, it's also really good to know that actually there are these promising like efficient classical algorithms that can do it as well, inspired by quantum. Yeah.
Liang, even by way of accident, one of the fun things with fundamental research is you don't know where it's going to take you. Is one of the promises then of quantum research that it might actually make classical computing better?
Yeah, well, I think yes, I think it's possible, and maybe it could improve classical computing in multiple ways. I know like one possible approach is that probably using like these optical circuits and so on, you can significantly reduce the power consumption and the heating problem because it's an important one. And I know like maybe people are thinking about novel optical ways to reduce the power consumption with our quantum-inspired technologies, right? And I think it's another way of helping the classical computing. Besides like, okay, building inspire new algorithms, or even building a quantum like a GPU to help with the classical computing. Even these basic elements of classical computers could benefit from the quantum technology.
Liang, looking to the future, as you well know, there's always the element of hype in quantum computing, that it's just around the corner, that it's already here. Where do you see the hype, where we should temper expectations? And where do you see the excitement that this is real, that we're actually on our way to this goal?
Well, I would say it's great that people have a great enthusiasm and high expectations for the field. On the other hand, I think that it's also our researchers' responsibility to make sure that when we make claims or predictions, it should be based on what we're thinking. And sometimes there's a tendency to say, my research will solve the whole problem and so on. But we should be cautious in making those claims. And I would say overall the field indeed has many interesting promises. On the other hand, I think that indeed sometimes that it's many of those are actually open research questions, and we should be careful and in making claims. But at the same time, I would say the researcher, I think it's a great time to do research, and we're working as hard as we can to solve those problems, and hopefully we will be able to cover real large scale fault tolerant quantum computer in the near future.
Liang, for wherever the research takes you, what are some of the things you learned at Caltech that will always stay close to you, that will inform your approach to the research?
Yeah, well, I think there are multiple things from a different level. And I would say one is in terms of overall try to solve different levels of research problems. I think it's actually many of my mentors at Caltech, they actually really reach out to solve some really ground and important problems, which I find is actually very helpful. And all those discussions is very encouraging and constructive. I think it's also very important for research. And the other is maybe more at a kind of a technical level, the skills that I learned from actually from John Prescott and Hideo Mabuchi. And also there are other mentors when I was undergrad, Bob McLeese, who was also a well-known professor at Caltech working on this error correction. And I was fortunate enough to actually learn about classical error correction and classical channel theory from him, which I am really grateful. And also other researcher David Palliser, Kip Song, who I took multiple of his classes, and he was always very encouraging and role model as well. And also Alexei Kitaev, even though I haven't collaborated with him, he's really the excellent researcher, making great contribution to the field. Yeah, so I think that having an opportunity to just working with these people, and or even just learn from them, even daily interactions, I think it's really encouraging, actually, to see there are these great researchers that you actually inspire you to do better research. Yeah.
Liang, finally, last question. Because the development of quantum computers is more like a process than it is a singularity where there's a before and there's an after, as we continue on this process towards quantum computation, what are the benchmarks that you'll be looking for, both as a participant and as a watcher among your colleagues in this pursuit?
You mean some of these, I was thinking maybe more some of the key milestones for the field.
Exactly.
That if we can get there, it's indicating that, we're making actually another important step towards the ultimate goal, right? Yeah, so I would say maybe for different field, for different thrust, there's different milestones. For example, for the quantum sensor, I think we are actually already having lots of interesting quantum sensors. We can already probe a nanoscale, a spin dynamics with a high resolution. So that's something which I would say it's already emerging as a promising application, which might already have some industrial application. And in terms of communication, I think a longer distance communication, because we already can do communication over urban size, 100 kilometers. If we can push it to 1,000 or a global scale with the high communication rates, that will actually allow us to have a broader use of the quantum technology, which might also affect everyone's daily life. And that also opens the possibility of building a larger scale quantum network. And for computing, I would say it's more the size of the size and the quality and the controllability of different qubits And to the scale, I would say I really look forward to see there is a error correction can help improve the performance of a quantum device. And once that's there, then we can start to build more and more so that you will be able to build a fault-tolerant quantum device. So I think that's an important milestone, which probably will emerge as a kind of outstanding challenge for the whole field, in the near future. Yeah.
It sounds like no matter what happens, it's going to be exciting along the way.
Exactly.
Liang, this has been great talking to you. I'm so glad we were able to do this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you for the questions. It's good to actually to revisit and think about all the nice days at Caltech.
Absolutely.